Hello, thanks for joining this lesson. So we are at lesson number 8. This one is the syllabus. We are actually at CDN design today. So CDN is a key component that nowadays you find in any solution. It is a content distributed network. As the word means, is distributing the connection in somehow. If you are having an on-prem, you are adding a CDN. It means that you change the DNS pointers to the CDN itself, and every connection before to it your on-prem is going through the CDN. Why this one is important? First of all, distribute the request, does the caching, mitigate DDoS attack. You can perform a web application firewall outside your on-prem, so you are filtering and blocking the attacker more far away than you can. You are going to be capable to do application routing. That is quite good also for A/B testing. It will let you to not just do application routing for A/B testing, but wherever you want. But it will let the client to connect to the closest POP of a CDN. This one is a quick overview of what CDN is. The problem is you are probably aware, because if you are following an infrastructure security consultant course, you do have that minimum understanding of how an infrastructure works. But right now, CDN is built in whatever product you buy. For example, for your any cloud service product is actually having a CDN front facing. Let's take for example AWS is having CloudFront in front, and CloudFront is going to be the one redirecting the request to your AWS product that you pick in your design. The main concern is the front-facing CDN is actually your attack surface. But to be your attack surface, you need to be sure that the attacker never bypasses the CDN. So it's really important that in your design consideration, you always see that as a condition sine qua non, that the attacker can't route his request bypassing the CDN, or you'll bypass your controls. Let's talk about security, not just in terms of being the first op, but in terms of history of attacks. CDN is highly exploited by attackers for their caching capabilities. So we are talking about 2017. There was one of the biggest CDN attack was used for dropping a Trojan, was caching the content. Unfortunately, later on in 2018, was used also on Google CDN. Here you have a link if you are curious to see that. It's just a bit of history. Unfortunately, 2021, nothing changed. Uh, Now is Discord CDN, so the CDN used by Discord to be heavily exploited for malware content. So you need to think on that when you design as well. So what is caching? How you avoid an attacker to cache malicious content? And how do you actually control that cache? So that is one of the key points that sometimes in design you don't find. So consider always what is the flow. As I told you, I'm repeating myself. In a lesson, I teach you to look through the UML flow of a request. So you know that the client will go to the CDN. What happened at the CDN? CDN is actually acting as a proxy and is the first SSL and shake that you'll have. So you need to be sure to have a reserved pool of IP from the CDN to connect to on-prem. Be sure that the attacker can't bypass that, and you'll have the second SSL handshake. So the CDN is the opportunity for SSL inspection, web application firewall filtering, but it doesn't change what will be the kind of control that you'll have. You need to think in terms of bypass always. So some CDN are using header in the HTTP request for routing, for application routing. That is one of the way how you bypass CDN, and so pay attention to what is the logic of your application routing. Is it checking and parsing an HTTP header? Because the HTTP header can be tampered by an attacker and can bypass your controls. So always design your YAML flow. Always check which is the logic for your control, and double check what is the consistency as well. Consistency, I mean, you need to be sure that it's applied all the time, the same controls in the same manner. And actually, you can have rules that are specific, but don't forget the API, because CDN play a big role also in API, because the endpoint of the API gateway is in a CDN. The last lesson we discussed the importance of API gateway, but you need to think that CDN is a common design across whatever stack you are using. So don't forget that the CDN is a component, API is another one, and so in your threat model, always have a big picture of how the pieces of your design are interacting. There are some limitations in cloud when you design, because if you use, for example, some cloud vendor can have limitation on which feature you can enable. So they generally create their product line having a big distinguish between DDoS as shield capabilities from the web application firewall capabilities. So when you are designing and you are doing the puzzle with all these pieces, because you can use it, you could have some limitation that are vendor related in terms of what the cloud service provider let you to enable on that. There is always a component also in terms of prices, and consider in your design what is happening if there is, for example, a DDoS. Who pay the bill? Who foot the bill for that? Is the provider capable to understand that? Don't focus only on cloud solution, because we are moving in a multi-cloud, and the CDN will be independent from the cloud service provider. So that will take a bigger role more we go into multi-cloud, because we want to have the client to connect to a CDN, and the CDN to redirect to whatever cloud we think is the best one. This one is a portion of a picture of a future or the present, because it's actually something that is already happening. You need to consider that when you are doing this consideration on application routing, on the fact that you are routing, you need always to keep in your threat model the DNS. This is one of the biggest risks that you are having. And the complexity of a DNS conversation is getting trickier and trickier, because right now you do have a lot of exfiltration path, like for example DNS over HTTPS. You do have always you are relying on the DNS of somebody else. It can be your client DNS, can be your CDN DNS at the time that he is doing application routing. So in your UML flow, always consider which DNS is actually serving your request and what is the best way to control that. Another consideration is, do you actually uh, filter those DNS requests? Do you have controls in controlling what the DNS is carrying? And so this one is obviously for the tunneling portion. DNS exfiltration is one of the easiest way to exfiltrate data. There are a plethora of new design that you need to put into the CDN picture. SD-WAN is one of the biggest one. And so right now, here is courtesy of malware, we are having a lot of network inter-exchange. And so we do have an SD-WAN fabric. You'll have a cloud service provider picture that can be related to various vendor. You could have an access entry point of a SASE that as a component can have a CASB. If you don't follow this terminology, have a look to each. So when you are securing a remote access, for example, of an employee that is having access from home, you want, for example, to have a gateway, and that gateway can be a CASB, or that CASB itself, Cloud Access Broker, or that CASB can be part of a biggest strategy that is the SASE, that is a component. You'll have this client connecting to something. So first question is, how does he connect? How does he recognize that he's connecting to the right CDN? So do you have SSL mutual TLS? Does he recognize and does he have that certificate in the picture? So look into this flow and look at how all these CDN interact to each other. So you'll find yourself to define a third-party CDN that will do application routing to others. So when you are designing a cloud solution for latency reason, for product reason, for integration reason, you are keen to use your cloud service provider CDN. This one will change at the time that we go for a multi-cloud. We'll have a third party pointing and going to those. The complexity of the TLS 1.3 will not allow too much man in the middle of CDN. So if you point, for example, to a management interface, an API of a cloud service provider, he will do his best to avoid to have an attacker in the middle. And TLS 1.3 play a big role into that because the SSL and shake and the way how is established change, and is all attention was towards the man in the middle component. Obviously, this one introduced complexity because in your design, at the time that you place a CDN in the middle, the handshake with the cloud service provider will come from uh, from your CDN, and so will be client CDN, CDN, SSL handshake with your cloud service provider. That will be one of the problems that you'll face. And it's one of the reasons why you have in Cloud Access Broker the offline path. So don't be scared by the complexity of the conversation. Always make a diagram like this one and check what interact with what. At the time that you have an SD-WAN fabric, you have entire conversation about SD-WAN in one of my lessons It's not part of his course, but it is part of my channel. So look for SD-WAN conversation. You will have a walkthrough quite basic from the beginning, and he is for sure helping into this conversation. But understand how all CDN interact with each other. Who does the SSL and shake? As I teach you from the very beginning, SSL and shake is your reference. So who does the SSL and shake with who, and how you recognize that is the right SSL endpoint, and which DNS is service that request. That is the basic. You have a complex CDN picture. Look at simplify the control, and so keep it simple is a security architecture principle that is extremely important when you do this complex design. Keep it simple, trying to see if one CDN layer is enough, because anyway the CDN function need to be close to the client. When you do caching, you want the caching to be close to the client. So also from a performance perspective, the POP that will serve should be just close to the client. So keep it simple, don't create cascade of CDN, consider problem of SSL, controls which web application firewall we stop. The rules is always stop the attacker more far away from your environment. So more close to them, not to your environment. When you keep these rules, trying to see how they integrate, understand something that people is still forgetting. If you cache content and it's coming from a private, and is supposed to be a private content, look into caching, because it is one of the best way to do data exfiltration, is to actually see all these CMS platform that don't care, that are supposed to be private, still cache in public. And it's like somebody looking at the rubbish bin of your house and taking information out of that. Consider malware. If you have an upload function, for example, a user that can do a blog post in your platform, you could find yourself that you don't have control on what is uploaded in that CDN caching. That means that a malicious internal threat, even if it's an internal framework, can use a payload in that image. So don't underestimate the kill chain, and how image can contain malware too, and how a simple post of an internal employee can let all company to connect to that and can be used for a C2C. So CDN is easy to be understood, is a set of proxy distributed in front, okay, but as you see, the complexity from a security standing point is tough. So think in flow, SSL, who serve the DNS, how you know who is serving that request, and which control you have in place. Keep it simple, the rule, think about malware, caching, and consider also legal consideration. One of the biggest problem is if your client is a laptop of one country, what is happening if he's traveling? And so think also about legal implication. Consider complexity of certain countries that are having big country firewalls. Consider east-west move as well. Can somebody exfiltrate something because your CDN does application routing and can be sneaky? Modify the HTTP header that you are using for application routing and do this game of exfiltrating stuff. Think about it, is important. Don't forget, look at the big picture always. You are an infrastructure security consultant, doesn't matter what's your role. You could be a CISO, you could be looking at a project. You need to zoom out and think about the complexity. There is an attack mitre that will explain you this complexity in terms of infrastructure. So you have to think about it. If I'm here creating this course, is for that. There is a lot to think about. So look at the picture, look at how all pieces integrate, the SSL, how the attacker doesn't bypass your control in application routing, but also in routing itself. Don't forget that each IP address you registered into an AS, an autonomous system. And so if you as a company registered everything with your name, your attacker can also look up into those network registry. So be 100% sure that those public IP are not accepting traffic if not through your CDN. And be sure to have been paid the CDN to have a registered pool of resources. Okay, so look into that. uh, Zoom out and zoom in as you need. Think about also the cloud service provider limitation and understand what's the strategy in terms of multi-cloud. You'll find yourself with an added complexity tomorrow that there is a multi-cloud, and it will not be something that it will be fixed only by orchestration layer in terms of where you deployed your containers, because it will be a way more complex picture also on terms of DNS, which POP the client connect. I hope you'll find it interesting. I put a lot of passion into that. I hope you see, and I try to keep it short. Are all big topics. I just try to give you the point of view from an attacking perspective and from an infrastructure perspective. Subscribe so you'll be notified when new content is uploaded. Next lesson will be about VPN and various problem, for example, the complexity of the split tunneling and all other. So you'll find, I hope you'll find interesting the next topic too. You have in my channel a playlist with all lesson, so go through that. But don't forget to visit also all other videos, because like for example for the SD-WAN, I have an entire video about SD-WAN. Okay, thanks a lot for listening. Have a good one. Cheers.